Lauren was already waiting on the sidewalk when I pulled up, arms crossed, jaw tight. The kind of stillness that pretends to be patience but is really just anger on a leash. I recognized it instantly. We hadn't spoken in weeks, and yet there she was, ready to reclaim space she no longer had. I stayed inside the car for a second longer than necessary, breathing through the weight of her stare. Then the passenger door opened. Rebecca stepped out slowly, closing the door behind her with deliberate calm. She didn't rush. She didn't look around. She just stood beside me, present in a way that felt grounding. I saw Lauren's reaction before I heard her inhale. The fury drained from her face in real time, replaced by something far more dangerous. Her body froze. Completely. Like she'd been struck by a memory she hadn't chosen to unlock. The silence stretched. Lauren's eyes weren't on me anymore. They were locked on Rebecca with a familiarity that made my chest tighten. Not jealousy, not confusion. Recognition. Rebecca stiffened beside me, just slightly. Just enough to confirm that this wasn't coincidence. Whatever history stood between them had weight, and it had just walked back into the open. I had loved Lauren once, in a way that burned fast and left nothing behind. Everything between us had been intensity without safety, desire without rest. With Rebecca, it was different, quiet, physical, certain. Standing there, caught between past and present, I felt how fragile that certainty could be when the wrong person decides to test it, because Lauren didn't just see me that day. She saw what I had chosen, and in her silence, I knew she was already planning how to take it apart. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from if you want the full story. I hadn't planned to bring Rebecca with me. That's the lie I tell myself when I want to feel less exposed. The truth is, I wanted her there. Not as a shield, not as a message, just as proof. Proof that my life had moved on into something quieter and far more dangerous to the past I'd escaped. Lauren stood on the sidewalk like she owned the space, the air, the memory of me. She always did. Tall, sharp, perfectly composed in a way that once thrilled me and later taught me fear. She didn't smile when she saw the car. Her eyes went straight to the windshield, then narrowed slightly, already irritated by the delay. Lauren hated waiting, hated not being in control of timing. I knew that posture too well, the crossed arms, the rigid shoulders, the jaw set like a challenge. She expected me alone, that much was clear. I opened my door first, stepping out into the late afternoon heat. The city hummed around us, traffic, voices, a distant siren, but everything felt muted, like sound had decided to step back and watch. Lauren's gaze locked onto me immediately, sharp and assessing, scanning for weakness. I felt it instinctively, the old reflex to brace myself. Then the passenger door opened. Rebecca stepped out. She moved with an ease that wasn't careless, but grounded. Dark hair loose around her shoulders, simple clothes, nothing performative. She didn't look at Lauren right away. She didn't need to. The shift happened anyway. Lauren's face changed so fast it almost startled me. Anger evaporated. Her body froze. Not confusion. Recognition. Her breath hitched once, shallow and unguarded, before she masked it too late. I looked from Lauren to Rebecca, trying to understand what I was seeing. Rebecca's posture stiffened subtly, like a muscle remembering an old injury. She turned her head then, eyes meeting Lauren's for the first time. The look that passed between them was silent, loaded, and far older than me. My stomach tightened. This wasn't jealousy. This was history. "Hi," Lauren said finally, her voice a fraction too controlled. She didn't look at me when she spoke. Her eyes stayed on Rebecca, studying, searching, measuring. "I didn't know you were coming." "I'm Emily's partner," Rebecca replied calmly, her tone neutral but firm. Not defensive, declarative. Partner. The word landed differently than girlfriend ever had. I felt it settle into me, solid and real. Lauren smiled then, slow and sharp, the same smile that had once made me feel chosen, and later made me feel small. "I see," she said, finally turning her attention back to me. "Well, this should be efficient." Efficient. That was how she framed endings, like transactions. Our relationship had always been like that. intense, physical, consuming, but measured in what I could give and how quickly. Everything had revolved around desire, performance, availability. I'd mistaken urgency for intimacy. Lauren never corrected me. With Rebecca, nothing had been rushed. We'd learned each other in layers, conversation before touch, presence before expectation. When things turned physical, it wasn't loud or frantic. It was deliberate, warm, sustaining. Standing there between them, I felt the difference in my body like a line drawn in ink. Lauren gestured toward the building. I've boxed everything already. Shouldn't take long. I nodded, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt. Not because I was afraid of Lauren, but because I sensed she was already rearranging the board. Her eyes flicked once more to Rebecca, lingering just long enough to confirm something only she understood. As we walked inside, I didn't know yet that this was the moment Lauren stopped reacting and started planning. I only knew that whatever she'd felt when she saw Rebecca beside me wasn't over. It was just beginning. The drive home was quieter than I expected. Not tense, just dense, like the air had thickened around us. Rebecca kept her eyes on the road, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting loosely on her thigh. She didn't reach for me the way she usually did at red lights. I told myself it meant nothing, that silence didn't always mean distance. Still, I felt the echo of Lauren's stare pulsing between us, uninvited. I replayed the moment again and again. The way Lauren's anger had vanished. The way her attention had snapped to Rebecca with something close to reverence, or threat. It unsettled me more than if she'd shouted. Lauren had always been loud with her emotions. That stillness had been new, strategic. I wondered what I'd missed while standing right there. At home, the evening unfolded with practiced ease. We cooked, we talked about small things. Rebecca laughed at something I said and kissed my cheek, warm and familiar, but there was a restraint to her touch, like she was holding something back. Not affection, but information. I noticed it in the pauses between her sentences, in the way she chose her words carefully, like she was editing herself in real time. Later, curled together on the couch, I studied her face in the low light. Rebecca wasn't distant. She was present in a deeper, more deliberate way. It made me feel safe and curious. "You okay?" I asked softly, not accusing, just open. She met my eyes, searched them, and smiled. "Yeah," she said, "I am." It sounded true. It also sounded incomplete. Sleep didn't come easily. Lauren's apartment building replayed in my mind. The entrance, the boxes, the way she'd said efficient like a verdict. I thought about my past with her, how everything had revolved around heat and urgency. Sex as punctuation, sex as resolution, sex as apology. I'd learned to equate intensity with truth. It had taken time, and Rebecca, to unlearn that. With Rebecca, desire didn't demand proof. It existed without pressure. When we touched, it wasn't a negotiation. It was a conversation. That difference had rewired me in ways I was only beginning to understand. I realized how rarely I'd felt calm in love before, and how fiercely Lauren had always resisted calm. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was brushing my teeth. A message from Lauren. Short, polite, controlled. "I realize there are still a few things here that belong to you. Some paperwork too. Might be easier if you come by. No emojis, no edge, just practicality." I stared at the screen longer than necessary. With Lauren, practicality was camouflage. I didn't reply right away. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee cooling in my hands, and listened to Rebecca moving through the apartment. Her presence grounded me. The message felt heavier because of it, like a test I hadn't studied for. When Rebecca sat across from me, I told her about the text without softening it. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. "Do you want to go?" she asked calmly. Not should, not alone, just want. I appreciated that more than reassurance. I considered the question honestly. "I think I should," I said. To close it, Rebecca nodded once. "Okay." No hesitation, no warning. Just trust, offered freely, not demanded. As the day went on, Lauren sent another message, more specific. A time. An hour that lined up too neatly with Rebecca's late meeting. I noticed it. filed it away. I told myself coincidence was still possible, that I wasn't obligated to assume the worst just because I knew her patterns. Still, my chest tightened. That night, as Rebecca held me in bed, her breath steady against my shoulder, I felt the pull of two truths at once. How far I'd come, and how easily the past can learn your new address. I didn't know yet what Loren was planning. I only knew she was no longer improvising. And I knew that whatever waited for me at her apartment wouldn't be unfinished business. It would be a test. The first message from Loren arrived the morning after the parking lot encounter, polite enough to pass as harmless. I realized I still have a few of your things, mostly paperwork. We should finish this properly. No emojis, no edge. Just closure disguised as responsibility. I stared at the screen longer than I wanted to admit. With Loren, practicality had always been a costume. I didn't answer right away. I carried the phone with me through the apartment, letting the day happen around it. Rebecca moved easily through our space. Coffee brewing, windows open, a playlist humming low. The normalcy felt earned. I told myself that was why Loren's message felt intrusive, like a knock on a door that wasn't hers anymore. When I finally replied, I kept it short. Okay, let me know what works. The response came minutes later, precise and already decided. A day, a time, an explanation that sounded reasonable enough to silence doubt. I noticed the detail without naming it. The hour she chose overlapped perfectly with Rebecca's late meeting. I told myself it was coincidence. Loren had always been good at giving coincidence a convincing alibi. Rebecca didn't ask to see the messages. She didn't hover. She just noticed the shift in me, the way my shoulders held tension differently, the way I checked the clock. She reached out, she said, not as a question. I nodded. We stood there for a moment, the space between us quiet but attentive. Do you want to go? She asked. The word want mattered. I appreciated that she used it. I think I should, I said, honest with myself, if not entirely certain. Just to finish it. Rebecca nodded once, slow and measured. She didn't warn me. She didn't tell me what to do. She trusted me with the choice, and that trust felt heavier than any rule could have. Over the next 2 days, Loren sent more messages, each one framed as logistics. A building policy, a note about the concierge, a reminder about a folder I'd forgotten. None of it was urgent. All of it was specific. I recognized the rhythm then, faint but familiar. Loren didn't rush. She arranged. She didn't corner. She cleared space until the corner appeared on its own. At night, I found myself thinking about our past in sharper detail than I'd allowed in months. Not the love. I was past romanticizing that, but the mechanics. How she'd used intensity to blur boundaries. How sex had been the language for everything. Apology, argument, reassurance, control. With her, silence had always been a threat. With Rebecca, silence was a resting place. The difference mattered more now that Loren was circling it. Rebecca noticed my thoughts before I spoke them. We sat on the edge of the bed, knees touching, the room dim and safe. She's setting something up, she said quietly. Not accusatory, not afraid, certain. I looked at her, surprised by how calm she sounded. I don't think she wants closure, Rebecca continued. I think she wants to see if the old door's still open. I swallowed. Do you think they do? Rebecca met my eyes without flinching. Not if you see what she's doing, she said. She'll try to make it feel natural, familiar, like you're just stepping back into a version of yourself you already survived. She paused. That doesn't mean you will. Her confidence wasn't bravado. It was informed. I didn't ask how she knew. I wasn't ready for that truth yet. But something settled in me all the same. Awareness. Loren's messages stopped feeling like errands and started feeling like staging. The time, the tone, the insistence on privacy, none of it was random. The night before the agreed day, Rebecca kissed me slowly, deliberately, as if to anchor a feeling rather than provoke one. There was heat there, real, present, but also something steadier beneath it. Whatever happens, she said against my shoulder, Tell me the truth. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation, one I intended to accept. When morning came, the city wore a thin gray sky, the kind that flattens color and sharpens edges. I dressed simply, choosing comfort over armor. As I grabbed my keys, I felt a familiar flutter, old reflexes stirring, not desire. Memory. I named it for what it was and felt it loosen its grip. Lauren texted once more. See you later. Nothing else. I took a breath and stepped outside, aware now that this wasn't about finishing anything. It was about whether I could recognize a pattern while standing inside it and choose differently before it closed. Rebecca waited until the night before I was supposed to go. Not because she hesitated, but because she understood timing better than anyone I knew. We were in the living room, lights low, rain tapping softly against the windows. The city felt close, folded in on itself. She turned the volume down on the music and said my name the way you do when you're about to change the shape of something. There's more you should know, she said. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded and sat across from her, already aware that whatever she was about to say had weight. Rebecca didn't pace. She didn't dramatize. She folded her hands loosely in her lap, grounded in her body in a way that made me trust what was coming even before I heard it. I was with Lauren, she began. Before you. The words landed cleanly, without shock, because somewhere inside me, I had already known. She told me how it started, how Lauren had been magnetic, precise, intoxicating in her certainty, how being chosen by her had felt like being pulled into a current you didn't question until you were already under. Rebecca spoke about falling in love slowly, sincerely, believing she was building something mutual. Lauren, she said, loved the devotion. She loved being needed. She didn't love sharing power. Then came the shift. Lauren met a man, wealthy, established, everything she framed as security. She didn't leave dramatically. She didn't explain herself fully. She reframed the decision as maturity, as inevitability. Rebecca was told to understand, to accept that love wasn't always enough. They married, Rebecca said, and when he died 2 years later, she inherited everything. No bitterness in her voice, just fact. That's when she came back into my orbit. Not to apologize, to see if I was still available. My chest tightened, not with jealousy, but with clarity. The freeze in Lauren's body, the way her attention had snapped to Rebecca like a reflex. It all made sense now. She doesn't love people, Rebecca continued. She loves leverage. She met my eyes then, steady and unflinching, and when she sees something she lost doing well without her, she wants to touch it, not to keep it, to prove she still can. I thought about the messages, the timing, the insistence on privacy, the way Lauren had framed the apartment as neutral ground, when it had always been her strongest tool. I felt anger rise, but it wasn't hot or reckless. It was clean, protective. She's going to try to get you alone, Rebecca said gently. On her terms, in her space. She'll bring up the past, but not all of it. Just the parts that made you feel wanted. She'll try to make it physical quickly, because that's where she's always had control. She paused. And she'll do it calmly, like it's inevitable. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Rebecca didn't flinch. Because I didn't want fear to make the decision for you, she said. And because I trust you to choose once you understand the pattern. She reached across the space between us and took my hand. Her touch was warm, real. I'm not asking you not to go. That surprised me more than anything else. I'm asking you to go awake, she continued, and to come back honest. We sat there for a long time after that, hands still joined, the rain steady against the glass. I realized something in that quiet. Lauren had always demanded proof of desire, proof of loyalty, proof of sacrifice. Rebecca didn't demand anything. She trusted the shape of who I had become. Later, when we were in bed, our closeness felt different. Not urgent, not defensive. We touched with intention, with presence. I felt anchored in my body, in my choice. Whatever Lauren tried to pull me back into, I would recognize it now. Not because I was immune, but because I was aware. The next morning, as I got dressed, the city looked sharper somehow, edges clearer. I checked my phone once. No new messages. I didn't feel calm, but I felt prepared. When I leaned down to kiss Rebecca goodbye, she rested her forehead against mine. "Whatever she tries," she said softly. "Remember how this feels." I nodded. And for the first time since Loren had texted me, I knew exactly what I was protecting. Not a relationship, not a promise. Myself. Loren's building looked exactly the way I remembered it. Clean, quiet, anonymous in the way expensive places often are. Neutral colors, controlled light. Nothing that invited emotion, everything designed to contain it. I stood at the entrance for a moment longer than necessary, steadying my breath, reminding myself why I was there. Boxes, paperwork, that's it. She opened the door almost immediately, as if she'd been watching the hallway camera. "You're right on time," she said, stepping aside to let me in. Her voice was calm, warm even. Too warm. Loren had always known how to soften her tone when she wanted something to feel inevitable. Inside, the apartment was immaculate. Not sterile. Curated. The boxes were stacked neatly near the wall, labeled with my name in her familiar handwriting. A folder rested on the dining table, centered like an offering. The lights were low, though it was still afternoon. Music played softly in the background. Something slow. Familiar. My stomach tightened. "I figured we could get this done quickly," Loren said, closing the door behind me. The click sounded louder than it should have. "No reason to drag things out," I nodded, walking toward the boxes, keeping my movements deliberate. I didn't take off my jacket. I didn't sit. Loren noticed. She always noticed when control slipped. Her eyes followed me closely, tracking not just where I was, but how I occupied the space. "You seem different," she said casually, pouring herself a glass of wine. She didn't ask if I wanted one. "Calmer." "I am," I replied. She smiled at that. Not amused, not pleased. Evaluating. "That new girlfriend of yours," she said lightly. "She has that effect?" The word girlfriend felt intentional, reductive. I met her gaze. "Her name is Rebecca." Something flickered then, too fast to be accidental. Loren turned away, bringing the glass to her lips, buying herself a second. "Of course it is," she said. "She always did like stability. Always." The word hung there, heavy with implication. I felt the pull of old instincts, defensiveness, explanation, but I let them pass. "I'm here to get my things," I said evenly. "Right," Loren agreed, though she didn't move. "Of course." She leaned against the counter instead, studying me like a problem she intended to solve. "You know," she added, softer now, "I never thought you'd be the type to settle." There it was, the hook disguised as concern. Loren stepped closer, not abruptly, but incrementally, shrinking the distance until I could feel her presence without being touched. The apartment seemed to narrow around us. Familiarity pressed in from all sides. The music, the lighting, the shared history embedded in the walls. "You were always so responsive," she continued, voice low. "So alive when things were intense." Her eyes dropped briefly, deliberately, then lifted again. "I hope you haven't forgotten that part of yourself." My body reacted before my mind could intervene, not with desire, but with memory. Muscle memory, pattern recognition. I felt it and named it instantly. This wasn't attraction, this was conditioning. "I haven't forgotten who I am," I said. "I've just stopped confusing intensity with intimacy." That made her laugh, soft, incredulous. "You always did like to rewrite the ending," she said. "Come on, Em. We both know what we had." I took a step back, re-establishing space. Loren noticed again. Her smile tightened. For the first time since I arrived, something like frustration leaked through her composure. "I should grab the rest and go," I said. She watched me bend to pick up the boxes, her silence stretching, recalibrating. I could almost see the plan shifting in her mind, adjusting angles, timing. This wasn't over. It was just entering a more dangerous phase. because Lauren hadn't brought me here to reminisce. She'd brought me here to see if the old doors still opened. And she wasn't done knocking yet. Lauren didn't stop me when I lifted the first box. She let the silence do the work, stretching it until it pressed against my ears. The music felt louder now, the bass slow and deliberate, like a pulse you couldn't ignore. I carried the box to the door and set it down, creating a physical marker. I'm leaving. When I turned back, she was watching me with a patience that felt practiced. "Before you go," she said gently, not blocking the door, not yet. "There's something I need to say." I stayed where I was, didn't sit, didn't step closer. Lauren took that as an invitation anyway. She moved with care, crossing the room in small increments, stopping just short of my space. The smell of her, familiar, expensive, hit me with a rush of memory so sharp it made my chest tighten. She knew that scent had always undone me. She hadn't changed it by accident. "I was angry the other day," she continued. "Seeing you like that, happy." Her mouth curved, almost rueful. "I reacted badly." She paused, eyes flicking to the door and back to me, "but anger isn't the whole story." I said nothing. Loren had always hated silence when she wasn't controlling it. She filled it now with softness, with vulnerability. "You were never just someone I dated," she said. "You were my weakness." She let the word linger, heavy and intimate. "And seeing you choose someone else, someone so..." She stopped herself, as if reconsidering the insult, different. It made me wonder if I misread us. The old reflex stirred. Explain, reassure, smooth it over. I felt it rise and named it, not love. Not desire. Training. She stepped closer. Close enough now that the space between us felt charged. Her voice dropped. "I know I hurt you," she said. "I know I used intensity when I should have offered safety. A confession, carefully portioned. But we were good together, Em. You felt it. I felt it." Her hand lifted, hovering, not touching. "Tell me you don't still feel it." The moment crystallized. This was the hinge. The place where the past tried to convince the present it was unfinished. My body reacted. Heat. Memory. The echo of nights where closeness had been the only language we spoke. I understood then how Lauren had always won. She didn't force. She invited. Her fingers brushed my wrist, light as a question. I inhaled, slow and deliberate, grounding myself in the room, in the here, in the truth Rebecca had trusted me with. "I feel familiarity," I said quietly. "Not want." Lauren's expression flickered, surprise, then irritation. She covered it quickly, leaning in instead, her breath warm against my cheek. "Familiarity is where real things live," she murmured. "You don't have to be loyal to something that's new just because it's comfortable." She angled her face toward mine, close enough that refusing would require movement, would require choice. I felt the weight of it then, how easy it would be to freeze, to let her take the next step and call it inevitable. I saw, with sudden clarity, how she planned to explain it afterward. A mistake, a moment, chemistry. I stepped back. It was small, barely visible, but it broke the spell. I lifted my hand, not to touch her, but to create space. "Don't," I said, not loud. Final. Lauren froze. The silence snapped tight. Her eyes searched my face, recalculating, anger beginning to seep through the cracks. "You think you're better than this now?" she asked, the softness gone. "You think she changed you?" "I changed," I said. "She just didn't ask me to disappear to prove it." That landed. Hard. Lauren's jaw tightened, her composure slipping. For the first time since I'd arrived, I saw the edge beneath the polish. "You're making a mistake," she said sharply. "You're choosing safety over truth." I picked up the second box and moved toward the door. My hands were steady. "No," I said. "I'm choosing honesty over habit." As I opened the door, Loren's voice followed me. Quiet. Dangerous. "This isn't over." I didn't turn back. I carried the boxes out into the hallway, the air cooler, cleaner. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Rebecca. "You okay?" I paused, breath catching. Not with guilt, but with relief. I typed back before doubt could speak. "I'm leaving now. I'll tell you everything." Because I knew then, Lauren hadn't almost kissed me to win me back. She'd almost done it to make sure Rebecca would lose. And she hadn't succeeded. I didn't go straight home. Not because I was hiding, but because my body needed a moment to come back to itself. I sat in the car with the engine off, boxes stacked in the back seat, the city moving past the windshield like a film I'd already seen once. My hands were steady. That surprised me. What lingered wasn't temptation. It was anger, clean and cold, at how close Loren had come to mistaking access for power. I called Rebecca before she could call me again. "I'm on my way," I said. "I'll tell you everything." There was a pause on the line, then her voice. Calm, grounded. "I'm here." By the time I walked into our apartment, the sun had dipped low, throwing long shadows across the floor. Rebecca stood by the window, phone in hand, watching me with a look that wasn't fear or suspicion. It was attention. She waited until I set the boxes down before she crossed the room. She didn't touch me right away. She gave me space to speak, so I told her. About the lighting, the music, the way Lauren had moved closer inch by inch, about the almost touch, the words chosen to blur lines. I didn't soften it. I didn't dramatize it. I told the truth the way Rebecca had asked me to. When I finished, the room was quiet. Rebecca exhaled slowly, as if releasing something she'd been holding since the parking lot. "She tried," she said simply. "Yes," I replied. "She did." Rebecca nodded, not in defeat, but in confirmation. She needed to know if she still could. She met my eyes, and now she knows. We didn't argue. There was nothing to accuse. What passed between us felt heavier and more real than relief. It was trust that had been tested and returned intact. Rebecca reached for my hand then, squeezing once, grounding, present. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "Not for not doing it, for telling the truth." That night, Lauren tried a different approach. The message came just before midnight. Long, emotional. Carefully written to sound vulnerable instead of calculated. She said she hadn't meant to cross a line. That seeing me had stirred things she thought were gone. That she was hurt. By me. By Rebecca. By how easily I'd replaced her. She framed herself as the one left behind. I read it once, then again. And then I saw it clearly. Not the emotion, but the intention. This wasn't an apology. It was bait. Something Rebecca was meant to see. Something Lauren hoped would create doubt where none had survived the night. I showed Rebecca immediately. She read the message without expression, then handed the phone back to me. "She's trying to rewrite the scene," she said. "Turn you into the problem. She won't stop, will she?" I asked. Rebecca shook her head. "Not until she feels irrelevant." The next day, Loren escalated. She didn't message me directly. She posted a photo from years ago, cropped just enough to be ambiguous. A caption about unfinished stories and timing. Nothing explicit. Everything suggestive. I felt the familiar twist in my stomach. The old instinct to manage perception, to clean up messes that weren't mine. Rebecca saw it too. "She wants me to doubt you," she said, not accusing, observant, "and she wants you to feel watched." I nodded. "She wants to punish us for surviving her." That evening, Loren sent one last message. Short this time. "Sharp, you think you won. Let's see how solid she really is." Something shifted in me then. Not fear, not anger. Resolve. "She's going to keep trying to interfere," I said to Rebecca. "I don't want her inside this anymore." Rebecca considered that, then nodded. "Then don't give her access," she said. "Give her consequences." Together we decided. No more replies. No explanations. No emotional labor. Lauren didn't need closure. She needed distance she couldn't negotiate. I blocked her number, then her socials. The silence that followed felt different from before. Not tense. Final. Standing there with Rebecca beside me, I understood something essential. Lauren's last attempt hadn't been about love or regret. It had been about proving she could still fracture what she'd lost. And she hadn't. Because the truth she underestimated was simple and devastating to someone like her. I believed the door had closed. I believed it had locked. What I didn't know was that Loren had never knocked. She only pushed. Lauren didn't text. She showed up. It was late afternoon, that quiet stretch of time she knew too well. Rebecca wouldn't be home yet. Lauren had always been precise with timing, not coincidence, but calculation. When the doorbell rang, something in my chest tightened before my mind caught up. I opened the door, and there she was. Calm, composed, familiar in a way that still reached places I didn't like to admit existed. She didn't rush in. She didn't touch me. Lauren had never needed force. She smiled slowly, like she was stepping back into a room she believed still remembered her. 5 minutes, she said softly. That's all I'm asking. I should have said no. I know that now. Instead, I stepped aside. She didn't comment on it. She never did when something went her way. Lauren walked in like she already knew where everything was, stopping just close enough that I could feel her presence without contact. The space between us filled with memory. You look good, she said quietly. Not flattery. Observation. Grounded. I'm asking you to leave, I replied, but my voice didn't carry the firmness I wanted. She tilted her head, studying me, not predatory, not aggressive. Intimate. You always did that, she murmured. You say one thing, but your body stays. She took one slow step closer, still no touch. Just proximity. Lauren knew exactly how close she could get before my breathing changed. She'd learned that map years ago. I'm not here to fight, she said. I'm here because you felt it too, back at the apartment. The hesitation. Her eyes met mine, steady and knowing. That pause before you pulled away. She lifted her hand, not grabbing, not claiming, just resting her fingers lightly at my wrist. The place she used to touch when she wanted me to feel seen. My pulse jumped instantly. My body remembered before my mind intervened. See? She whispered. You don't forget this. For a moment. Just a moment. I didn't move. Heat spread low and familiar, dangerously easy. This was Lauren's talent, not urgency, but precision. She didn't overwhelm. She aligned. Made it feel like choice when it was conditioning. Her thumb brushed my skin once, barely there. Enough. I closed my eyes, and that's when I saw it. Not her, but myself with her. The version of me that had learned to respond instead of decide. The version that mistook intensity for connection and called it love because it didn't know better yet. I opened my eyes. This is what you do, I said quietly. You don't ask. You remind. Her expression flickered, just slightly. I remind you of who you are, she said. No, I replied. You remind me of who I was when I thought this was all I deserved. I stepped back. The contact broke. The spell thinned. Lauren's hand dropped slowly, her face shifting. Not angry, not desperate, calculating again. You're choosing comfort, she said softly. Safety. I shook my head. I'm choosing someone who doesn't need to reach for my past to feel close to me. That landed. For the first time since she arrived, Lauren looked uncertain. Not rejected, but displaced. Like a language she'd mastered no longer worked. You love her, she said, almost to herself. Yes, I answered, and felt how solid the word was. The door opened then. Rebecca stepped inside, stopping when she saw us, not touching, but too close. Lauren turned, the moment slipping out of her control all at once. Rebecca didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She just said calmly, "This is over." Lauren looked at me one last time, searching for hesitation. There was none left. She left without a word. When the door closed, the silence felt different from before, not tense. Clean. Rebecca crossed the room and took my hand, grounding me back into the present. She almost knew how. She said gently, "Once," I replied. Not anymore. And for the first time, I understood how close I'd come. Not to losing Rebecca, but to repeating a version of myself I no longer recognized. The apartment felt different after Lauren left. Not emptied, cleared, like air after a window has been opened for the first time in a long while. I stood there for a moment, my back against the door, breathing in the quiet. My body was still buzzing, not with desire, but with the aftermath of having stepped away from something that once defined me. Rebecca didn't rush to fill the silence. She never did. She waited until my breathing slowed, until I came back to myself. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I nodded, then shook my head. "I am," I said, but I didn't realize how close it still lived under my skin. Saying it out loud felt important, honest. Rebecca listened without interruption, her presence steady and unthreatened. She wasn't asking for reassurance. She was offering space. We sat on the couch, close enough that our knees touched, far enough that nothing felt urgent. I told her what it had felt like when Lauren stood too close, how my body had reacted before my mind caught up, how familiarity can masquerade as truth when it knows exactly where to land. I didn't censor myself. I trusted Rebecca with the uncomfortable parts. She received them without flinching. "That doesn't scare me," she said after a moment. "What scares me is silence where honesty should be." She reached for my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. "You didn't hide. You didn't disappear. You stayed." That word, stayed, settled into me. With Lauren, staying had always meant surrender. With Rebecca, it meant presence. I felt the difference in my body, in the way my shoulders relaxed, in the absence of that old reflex to perform my feelings instead of living them. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. No dramatic fallout, no messages from Lauren, no vague posts orbiting our lives, just space. I realized then how much energy I'd spent anticipating disruption, bracing for impact. Without it, my nervous system slowly recalibrated. Mornings became lighter, sleep came easier, desire returned without sharp edges. One evening, we walked through the neighborhood as the sun dipped low, the city glowing soft and familiar. Rebecca slipped her hand into mine, casual and unclaimed, and I felt a wave of gratitude that surprised me with its intensity, not because she'd protected me, but because she'd trusted me to protect myself. "I keep thinking about something you said," I told her, "that Lauren reminds, she doesn't ask." Rebecca nodded, encouraging me to continue. I realized how often I confused being remembered with being known. She stopped walking and turned to face me. "Being known takes time," she said, "and consistency. It doesn't rush you into proving anything." That night, our closeness felt unguarded in a new way. There was heat, real, grounding, but also a tenderness that didn't feel fragile. We moved slowly, attentively, like we were listening as much as touching. I didn't feel pulled into memory. I felt anchored in the present. When I looked at Rebecca, I wasn't searching for myself in her eyes. I was meeting her where she was. Later, lying together in the dark, I let myself reflect on what had changed. Not Lauren's behavior, hers was predictable in hindsight, but my response. I had recognized the pattern while standing inside it. I had named it, stepped back. That mattered more than any confrontation ever could. "I don't feel haunted," I said quietly. "I feel finished." Rebecca smiled against my shoulder. "Finished doesn't mean untouched," she replied. "It means integrated." In the days after, I noticed how little Lauren occupied my thoughts. Not because I was suppressing anything, but because she no longer had leverage. The version of me she'd known had learned new boundaries, new language, new measures of intimacy. I understood then that growth isn't dramatic. It's cumulative. It shows up in the moments you don't fall apart. Standing in the kitchen one morning, coffee warming my hands, I caught my reflection in the window and smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was real. Because the door hadn't just closed, it had stayed closed. And on the other side of it, I was still here, choosing, staying, loving without losing myself. Love didn't announce itself afterward with fireworks or certainty. It settled in quietly, like something that had always belonged there and finally stopped asking permission. In the weeks that followed, life returned to its ordinary rhythms. Workdays, shared meals, errands that felt less like obligations and more like proof. Proof that nothing had been broken. That something, instead, had been clarified. Rebecca and I didn't talk about Lauren much anymore. Not because we were avoiding her, but because she no longer shaped the room. When her name did come up, it carried no heat, just context, a chapter that made sense now that it had an ending. I realized how rare that was, to look back at something that once ruled you and feel neither longing nor anger, just understanding. What surprised me most was how my body changed, the way it softened into calm instead of bracing for intensity. Desire no longer felt like something that demanded urgency or performance. With Rebecca, it rose and fell naturally, sometimes quiet, sometimes unmistakably present, but never transactional. I didn't have to earn closeness. I didn't have to prove I was worth staying for. I already was. One evening, as we sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker on, Rebecca leaned her head against my shoulder. "You know what's different now?" she asked. I waited. "You don't confuse being wanted with being chosen," she said. The words stayed with me long after the night cooled. Lauren had always wanted me, my attention, my responsiveness, my willingness to bend. But wanting is easy. It's impulsive. Choosing is deliberate. It shows up when things are quiet, when there's nothing to gain from intensity. That was the love I was living now. There were still moments. Of course there were. Memory doesn't vanish just because you've outgrown it. Sometimes a song would catch me off guard. Sometimes a familiar scent would flicker through my awareness, but the difference was immediate and profound. I didn't follow those moments anywhere. They passed. I stayed, and Rebecca stayed with me. We built something that didn't need secrecy or spectacle. Friends knew us. Our lives intertwined naturally, without urgency or hiding. Love didn't feel like a gamble anymore. It felt like alignment, two people choosing the same direction, again and again, without coercion. One morning, months later, I found an old photo while cleaning out a drawer. Lauren and I, frozen in a moment that once felt significant. I studied it without judgment, then put it away. Not as something forbidden, but as something finished. The past didn't need to be erased to lose its power. Standing in the kitchen afterward, sunlight warming the counter, I felt something steady and unmistakable rise in my chest. Gratitude. Not for surviving something hard, but for recognizing something better when it arrived. I used to think love was supposed to feel like losing control, like falling, like fire that burned until it consumed you. I know better now. Real love doesn't take you apart to prove it's real. It doesn't test your limits to see how much you'll give up. It doesn't need your past to stay alive. Real love lets you remain whole, and when I look at Rebecca, really look at her, I don't feel pulled backward or forward. I feel exactly where I am. Chosen. Present. Home.